This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library.
Enough, you can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price that you can get Truefire All Access for.
So in this video, I wanted to kind of give you some idea about what it might be like to get in a room with some of these FRFR solutions. Fender sent me the FR12. There's a ToneX Cab, which is generally what I use, and Line 6 also sent me the Powercab CL. Now, I should caveat this by saying that I'm kind of using the Powercab CL wrong for this video, specifically because when I do this sort of thing, I tend to run my cabs on in the actual unit. So these are FRFR solutions. The Line 6 Powercab CL in some ways is actually kind of designed for you to actually just turn your IR off and treat it like a real cab. So that is one of the things that hopefully you get some idea here around, like what it's like to add a tweeter in when you're at the back of the room. Because I'm normally someone who says, like, when I'm next to a guitar cab with a tweeter in it, I absolutely am not a fan of the way it feels. I tend to run things a little bit darker. What I decided to do was take this to a gig on Saturday night with my buddy Lewis Corbett and Matt Carter. So Matt's a drummer, Lewis is a singer and guitarist and a guitar teacher in Taunton if you're looking for one. And we were actually, you know, we had quite a long time to set up and stuff. So I said, do you mind if I bring some cabs and we shoot these things out? And then we decided, you know, what we would do is gig with whichever ones we actually preferred. Now, I'll show you some of the process. We'll talk about some of the dimensions and parts like that about these, and then you can make your own conclusions, hopefully from the audio a little bit. I've left the EQ on these basically flat. I haven't actually owned a Fender FR12 and ToneX Cab at the same time, but you can... maybe I did. But actually you can kind of see the Fender FR12 a little bit wider than the Line 6 Powercab CL, but I think a little bit shorter. The ToneX Cab is actually the smallest of them all by quite a margin. The thing that I really like about the ToneX and the Fender FR12 is the kickback stands, which are very much the same sort of thing. That one's a strap lock. That's a bass string ferrule, isn't it? But I think the classiest looking of all is the Tonemaster FR12. I want to see how they sound compared to one another. Or would it all just shake out in the wash? Right, we're ready. It's insanely loud. So this, just to clarify, this guy here is actually out there. Yeah, it is. It's so random. That's even higher. Oh, much quieter. I will say also that although it might come across in some ways like the Fender seems kind of loudish from listening back to some of this, I actually found that this is, I think, the quietest out of the units. I had to turn this up relatively way further on the volume. So the ToneX Cab is like a little bit of a cannon, like, you know, I've run that at like a third of the way up, and it's crazy like projection. And when I first stood behind the camera and kind of heard it, it was like, pff, like this was a real loud kind of volume that I'd started off testing this. So I'm sure that each of them are loud enough for most scenarios. But the ToneX Cab, I think, is loudest. I think the Powercab CL was louder than the Fender 2. But then this, you know, if you run the volume up about over halfway, was getting to sort of the levels where the ToneX Cab was on like a third of the way up. So that was interesting to me. Now, crucially, I asked both Matt and Lewis what their opinion was and which they preferred, and they were kind of unanimous on this. And Matt, which one do you like best?
The first time we plugged it into the tone amp, I thought was the cleanest. It's probably, I mean, the one on the left is the most like muddy and bassy.
This one or that one?
Sorry, that one.
This one.
I think it's fine. It's just a bit muddy. Those two are close, first and second.
Yeah. So Lewis, verdict?
I'm going Fender ToneX 96.
Matt, verdict?
The yellow one is nice, the middle one is also nice.
They each preferred the Fender FR12, which I think is kind of cool to hear from other folks. So the Fender FR12 is not the most expensive solution, the ToneX Cab is. And that was kind of interesting to hear. So the Line 6 Powercab CL, what I should have done if I'd had more time would have been to turn off the cabs in the fractal to go out to the Powercab to see whether that kind of flattened the curve, if you know what I mean, so that you got a bit more brightness back in, and maybe then it would sound more like an amp in the room. But in any case, I think some of the things that they liked about the Fender FR12 was like the crispness of it, and that it wasn't kind of muddy in the room. And so that was, the ToneX is a bit warmer, which I would say has definitely been the case for me. And then the Powercab CL, definitely warmer. Other words for that might be muddier though. So if you're looking for pure clarity, then that was kind of interesting to me. You might want to consider the Fender FR12 in that case. Once it's actually in the car, the size difference is even more apparent. Like, it's a few inches, right? That was their conclusion. My favourite, I think, of the three was the ToneX Cab. For me, the Fender FR12, when I was listening to it in that way, I don't really like super sort of clear tones. I'm a bit of a mud fiend. So that to me, the Fender FR12 definitely wasn't my favourite. So I was happy when Lewis picked that one, and I could pick the ToneX Cab to gig with that. But I'm starting to think that maybe my tones are dialed in a little bit dark for some of the live use. Because I dial them in basically to be used in a gig where there's not another guitarist most of the time. Like most of my function gigs, it would just be me and a keys player. And I don't want it to be like harsh, like cutting sort of stuff. I want it to be like a warm, smooth sound, like the opposite of maybe what you think of as digital. But then Lewis dials in his tones a bit brighter than me, and then it's kind of like a little bit too much contrast in some cases with that. So that's something for me to think about. But I guess the truth of this really is that these things all sound quite different, even if they are FRFR solutions or not even. Then I think outside of the mix, they all definitely sound and respond very differently. Like I say, the ToneX Cab way louder, the Fender FR12 a bit crisper for sure. So I guess it might be a different place where the crossover is on the tweeter, different speakers used. Both of these are closed back, which I do also think might help in terms of like dispersing more sound forward and maybe not spreading so much sound behind the cab, like on to stage and stuff like that. Whereas if you're wanting that real cab feel and to have a bit more of that filling up the stage sort of sound, then maybe the Powercab CL with its open back cabinet might be a fair shout. I also am in talks with Barefaced about putting a normal guitar speaker into one of their open back powered cabs and seeing how that works. So the journey continues, but I thought that was a nice to hear two people preferring the Fender FR12 over some more expensive options. So yeah, I think this is a fairly safe bet. I was running the cut on this up at halfway. If you bring it down a bit more, it gets even more kind of bright. So to me, this does lean way brighter than the ToneX Cab is what I found. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you've got any, if you can pass anything from that video. Cheers.